In this movie, we're going to look at some of the opening objects that are available to us in Revit. An opening object is a void object or like a negative object, and it actually cuts away from the solid objects that we have. So we can use voids to cut holes in other objects for a variety of purposes. Now, if you look at the Architecture tab on the opening panel, there are actually 5 different types of openings that we create. Now, we won't go through all 5 of them. I'm going to focus on just 2 in this movie. I'm going to look at the shaft opening and the dormer opening, but you're welcome to experiment with the others as well. So for the first example, the shaft example, I'm looking at a section through a 3-story building here, and I'm going to zoom in slightly right here around the elevator shaft. Now you can see I have an elevator object here, and at the moment, we've got a floor here, and we've got a floor here, and another one down here, and they're going right through the elevator shaft, so it would make it very difficult for that elevator to pass through there. Now, we really have 2 options on how we could deal with that situation. You could select the floor, edit its boundary. Because I'm in section, it would prompt me to open a more appropriate view like a floor plan. So I could open the level 2 floor plan. Once I get in there, I could zoom in on the area in question, draw a shape to represent the hole that I want to cut in the floor. And when I click finish, I'll say no to that question for now, and return to the section, you'll notice that it did in fact cut a hole there. Trouble is, it only did it for that floor. It didn't do it for these other 2. So I would have to repeat that 3 times. Now what I'm going to do is just come over here to my drop down for undo and undo all of those steps. And let's look at the alternative, which is the shaft opening. So creating the shaft opening is similar. It's still a sketch-based object, but what's nice about the shaft opening is you can make it any height that you need and it will cut through everything in its path. So let's get started in the first floor plan. So I'm going to come over here to the level 1 floor plan, zoom in on the elevator, and then let's click the shaft tool. That puts me in sketch mode, and we could use any of the tools that we've used before. And in this case, I'm just going to draw a simple rectangle, and I'm going to start from this corner right here on the outside of the masonry wall and snap to this corner here. Now notice that Revit will actually offer to lock the sketch, so you can close all of these padlocks. Now the advantage of doing that is if any of those edges move as the design changes, my shaft will adjust automatically. The disadvantage is that in some cases, it can throw an error message if it tries to move something and the constraint becomes unsatisfied. So just be aware that it might generate an error and you might want to be aware of that. But in this case, I think it's pretty safe to do, and I'll go ahead and finish that sketch. Now, when the shaft is selected, it kind of appears solid. Let's double click this section head right here to open up the section, zoom out slightly and see what that gives us. So notice that the shaft actually has a height to it. And at the moment, it looks like it's just tall enough to cut through all 3 of the floor slabs. So it's actually doing pretty much what we need. But notice that over here on the properties palette, you can make adjustments if you need to. So there's a base constraint, there's a top constraint, and an unconnected height. Now currently it's set to unconnected and it just arbitrarily picked a height of 6,096 millimeters. What I'd like to do here instead is make that go up to level 3 without an offset. That's a really subtle variation, but notice it got a little bit taller. But by tying it to level 3, if the heights of the levels ever change, it will keep the shaft at that height as well. When you deselect it, just click anywhere, you'll notice that it now cuts through all of the floor slabs in its way. And with a single sketch and a single object, we were able to cut through all 3 floor slabs. So that's a shaft opening, and it's very useful for any kind of vertical circulation or air shafts, mechanical ducts, those kinds of things. All right, let's look at another example. I have another file open here in the background called dormers. You can see here that I have a dormer at the top of this roof. And what I'm going to do is complete the dormer geometry and then create a dormer opening. If I were to select these objects right here, the roof and the 3 walls, and hide those, you'll notice that the roof is solid underneath, okay? So I'm going to reset the temporary hide. So the first thing that I want to do is take this roof and connect it to this one. And there's a real easy way to do that. You go to the Modify tab, and there's a command here called Join Unjoined Roofs. So I'm going to select that, And it will prompt me to select an edge or the end of the roof that I wish to join, right? And you can see that prompt on the tooltip and also down at the status bar in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. So that means one of these edges back here. Then it will prompt me to select a face of another roof that I want to join to. So like this face right here will do the trick. And notice that it will extend the roof out and make it connect to that one. The next thing that I want to do is begin creating the dormer opening. So now I'm going to go back to architecture and click on the dormer tool. This will prompt me to select the roof that's going to be cut by the dormer. That's going to be this one. And that will put me into sketch mode. And then there's a single button here to pick existing roof and wall edges. So this makes it really easy to create this opening. I can click this roof and that will create this little V-shaped sketch right there. And then I can click on each of the walls that make up this dormer shape. Now, if I click my modify tool to cancel and kind of orbit slightly, you'll see that this one ended up on the inside face of the wall instead of the outside face. But fortunately, there's a flip grip here and I can adjust that. And then I can use my trim and extend to clean up the shape. And then when I'm done and I click finish, that will complete the opening. Now, if I select this roof and isolate it, you can see that there's now a hole cut right through that roof there. And notice that the top edge is flat and the leading edge is vertical. Now, another way to see that is to come over here and open up the section. And if we zoom in right here, you can see the cut through there and the walls kind of go past and the roof goes past. And that gives you your dormer opening. So those are two really simple examples of opening objects that we have available to us. You're welcome to try the other opening objects as well. They will use similar prompts and they will do similar things and allow you to cut through various geometry. But the really neat thing about these opening objects is that you can create the object and then modify it at any time and it will adjust the opening accordingly. So you don't have to constantly rebuild your elements in order to achieve those effects.